It's exciting. I hope that our generation or older generation, even older than ours, will find a way to make bridges and will work together with young people, because I think that mix, or that what is the word I'm looking for? That level of collaboration is fantastic. We all bring something to the table, and that is just so beautiful, I think.
Right, we're recording. So hello and welcome to Let's Talk Leadership. Today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Ivana Busljeta, joining us from Athens in Greece. Ivana is a Director of Global Education for the Nonviolence Project Foundation's NVP. And NVP is an international NGO that delivers educational programs to adults and youths around the world. Ivana designs and delivers workshops and programs in the areas of emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, bullying, and sexual harassment. And she works with universities, schools, and corporates around the world. So Ivana, welcome to Let's Talk Leadership.
Hello, Brit, and thank you very much. What a mouthful introduction.
But I did it.
Well done, well done.
All right, so great to have you here. Ivana.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. What brought you to the line of work that you are so passionate about right now?
Yeah. So the line of work that I'm in at the moment, as you said very well, is the nonviolence education. And nonviolence is very kind of large and wide umbrella. So there are many different topics underneath. What brought me to that? In my previous life, so to speak, I was a trainer and facilitator in the areas of emotional intelligence and leadership and team building. And about 8 years ago, I got introduced to the founder of this organization, and I thought, how wonderful would it be to actually contribute to the cause of nonviolence by introducing seminars and workshops and education in this area, in the area of emotional intelligence and self-awareness. Because I actually believe that, to cause any change in the world, you have to really start on the inside. So it's that saying of first the inner change and then the outer change. On a more personal level, the reason why I'm passionate about nonviolence, or why I care about nonviolence, is because, I've experienced violence all my life. First it was a family violence, there was bullying, sexual harassment, and being from Croatia, I also lived through the war. Seeing your whole country being attacked and your friends dying and being injured and families and cities being destroyed is something you never forget. And I remember back then thinking, that I never ever want anyone to experience this again. And that's part of the story that really leads me to the work that I'm doing right now. There's something amazing that happens in the war. You experience very extreme emotions, and some of these extreme emotions on one side are anger and, why isn't anyone doing anything to help us? Why is everybody just watching? Hate. I never thought I could hate, but I think I did experience levels of hate back then, and the sadness and the desperation. And then on the other side, on the other spectrum, you or I experienced an amazing sense of connection to other human beings, an amazing drive to just wanting to help and be there for someone else, love, and the sense of unity that I felt, in my country. It was just amazing. So it's almost like, it gave me an insight into two worlds. What we're experiencing now on a larger scale as well, I would say globally, as we have many, many issues on our planet, this darkness of it, and then what is possible. So what is possible is really driving what I do today, because I have experienced it. I know it is possible. So I really do want it for all of us on a global scale.
Right. That's it. I would say that is an extremely powerful drive that you have there, and also the ability, I think, to translate something that must have been so traumatic into a hopeful drive, and into the idea that something else must be possible, and I want to be a part of that, right?
Yeah, and I think you've touched really nicely on a topic that I think, kind of translates through all of our programs, is how can you turn this challenge or upset in your life into something that is a blessing to you and everyone else? Because none of us go through life unharmed. Yeah, we all have difficulties and challenges. And how can we look at that and use it as a transformational point? And I have been very blessed, through my work. I have traveled to lots of countries and work with many different cultures and people. And I truly feel blessed is the only word I have, And then through that work, as I said, there's always I'm always sitting in two chairs. One is I'm feeling very blessed and grateful that I can actually do this work with so many people. And then I'm also wondering, why isn't everyone having access to this kind of work? To give you an example, the question is kind of haunting me these days is, for example, leadership development we talk about so much these days. It is so essential that in today's world that it's so full of challenges and it requires other or different level of thinking. We all need to step into a leadership roles. We all need to be leaders in some way, shape or form so we can actually together transform our world. So why isn't the leadership development or the top leadership development available to everyone?
Good question.
I think about, I'll give you an example. I worked with wonderful young people in Africa in their 20s, early 30s, and these are the people that are facing challenges we will probably never face in our life, and I mean hunger and poverty at the level we can't even imagine. And I have never met more driven group of people who actually realize that they cannot survive on the charity alone from the outside world, that they actually have to really foster and nurture entrepreneurship. So they are hungry for what we call a leadership development. They are hungry to learn how they can step into the levels of being, step into the levels of thinking that is required to solve their problems.
Yeah.
So my question is, why is that not available to them? Are we really keeping it only for privileged? Privileged, and I include myself into privileged. Why is that not available to everyone?
Sure. That's a very good question. And why does it become available sometimes at a later stage in life where, people are already established managers or lead companies or whatever, and then they get the money or the whatever, the permission to go to a program where, in fact, leadership starts, it starts with Greta Thunberg, with a 15-year-old sitting down outside the Parliament building because she's fed up with the threat to the climate. So do you think that the term leadership are we applying this too narrowly? Should we do our best to actually convince people, especially young people, that no matter how young you are, you may develop a voice and you may develop something to make the world a better place, for want of a better word?
Well, I think maybe it's not even that important what I think, but what I'm noticing is that the younger generation is making us think like that. Mm-hmm. We have this younger generation emerging who are very conscious of today's problems, and they actually want to participate. They want to help. They do not see the borders like, maybe our generation did or does. So maybe the question is for us, maybe we need to re-examine how we develop global leaders. Whose voices are missing? Like you said, maybe younger generation, maybe, people from certain countries, maybe people from certain classes, right? When we talk about now wealth distribution.
Oh, yeah.
As I said, at the moment, what I'm noticing is that what we call this leadership development is really reserved for the corporate arena. So here's a question for corporate arena, being in that, first of all, do we realize we're in that privileged position? Are we aware of that? And what are we going to do with it? And this is a lesson from now that we do, what is happening right now in America when they're facing this huge racial issue. So what is emerging is that white people are realizing their privileged position. They were not even aware of it. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, okay, so now that I realize that I am sitting in a privileged seat, what am I going to do with my privilege? And that is exactly the same question we can ask for our top corporate leaders and leadership people, including, as I said, some of us. What are we going to do with that privilege? How are we going to reach out to future global leaders so we can solve the problems, including nonviolence, including violence in the world. How are we going to solve these problems that are so interconnected, that are so complex, that require different levels of thinking? And to get to the different levels of thinking, we need to provide them with an ongoing education, exposure to this kind of work. So this is what is really bugging me lately. This is what I'm playing with. And as I said, it's very relevant to, of course, nonviolence. Nonviolence or violence is a very complex issue.
Yeah.
So whether we're talking about violence or poverty or climate change or any one of these big issues, I think this is applicable. How do we solve this? How do we move even more people to the different level of consciousness or different level of thinking or higher level of thinking so we can access collaboration, we can access creativity and innovation and all these skills and states of being that we need to solve these problems.
And compassion as well.
Absolutely compassion. Absolutely compassion. Yeah.
It also touches on the notion of vertical development, whereby we believe that we don't stop growing when we're 18, but as adults we develop from slightly more self-centered level to levels that really encompass almost at a spiritual level, a real transformation of self and others.
Yeah, it's that moving beyond the ego, at some point when we close with, when we finish with our teenage years, in terms of, as you've just mentioned, adult developmental stages, the next level is moving beyond the ego and, opening up and to we, but not everybody does, as we know. I think it was Robert Keegan. He's a professor at university at Harvard. That he talks about reactive and creative mind. And he says in this level of reactive ego mind, there's 70% of population, and it is not a given that everybody will move to the level of creative mind, which is the level you've just mentioned. But what is needed, once again, is that access to education, ongoing access, to these kinds of workshops, whether we call them leadership or whatever we want to call them, but, access, ongoing access and nurturing of the person. Is what is needed. And in that level, what he talks about creative mind is, of course, levels of compassion.
Absolutely, yes. If I can just go back, you mentioned that white people are now starting to recognize their own privileged position in a way that maybe they have not done on such a large scale in the past. And last time when you and I spoke together, you also mentioned a generational difference. Could you also say that maybe the fact that once you're older and once you are established in sort of a safe-ish environment and you've got your job and you've got your things in order, that we get less willing to talk about other people from other generations? And now I mean especially the young ones who sometimes have the feeling that they have no voice, they are not heard. The systems are still the old-fashioned ones that suit some of the older generations. What is your take on that, on the generational, on the need to collaborate across generations?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's absolutely essential, once again, to solve all the issues that we are facing. What I do observe and what I think is that, older generation brings or can bring wisdom and experience, because that is something that I think younger ones do not have yet, well, they're young. So, there's something that we can give and contribute to, but then staying with older generation, we also have to realize what our limitations are. What are our mindsets in terms of working with, especially younger generation, how we look upon them, and what we think is possible. I think each generation grows up with, with limitations. Of course, there are goods and, good things and bad things that we bring. So really having the courage and, to look into ourselves, and this is really deep, I think, work that we have to do with ourselves and challenge our mindsets and assumptions, and fears, when it comes to working with, different generations. And then for younger people, I think it's the same approach, is knowing the gifts that they bring, being aware of these gifts, and then also, learning to become self-reflective and saying, what are some of the challenges I have working with other generations? What are the fears and mindsets that are stopping me in this collaboration? And then I think that becomes, a work that needs to be done together. It's a work in progress, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's absolutely essential. I admire young people for their energy, and I am in absolute awe of how much they're aware of the world, and how much they care. My generation, I think we were different. We were not so maybe open or exposed to everything. I don't know, but I see younger generation today a little bit more smarter than we were. I have to say.
You have to be.
I really admire them,
Yes,
and yes,
so
there are challenges, and let's work together. But once again, to get to the point of let's work together, truly work together, we really have to develop individually as people. We have to move into this other level of consciousness, because as long as we are focused on what you mentioned, this ego, this me, myself, and I, my achievements and my success and my wealth, it's literally impossible to actually work collaboratively with someone else and to open up. So there's work on both sides.
There is work on both sides. And the only way we believe, me, my colleagues believe that true leadership happens is exactly through the shared responsibility, the sharing of feelings, shared compassion. And that has nothing to do, as was very well pointed out in another conversation that is on Let's Talk Leadership, it has nothing to do with soft cushions and scented candles and violin music. You can be very effective while still being compassionate as a leader. Yeah.
Absolutely. But so that is exactly that growth. I mean, it's all nice to be, to say I'm a, whatever we say, spiritual, or, we like our yoga classes and everything else. But it's going to take a little bit more. It's going to take some hard, deep look into ourselves. And that goes for every single person on this planet. We need to really look at our fears, or, as I said, mindsets. And that is painful sometimes. It's not easy to grow always.
No.
Open up ourselves to compassion. I think I mentioned this to you last time in one of our programs. We call compassion empathy in action. What that means is not only that I feel for you, but I'm actually driven to do something to either elevate your pain or help you in some way, shape, or form. So it's really that. It's being compassionate, but in action, not just saying, well, I feel for you, in a kind of a static mode. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that it's linked to the 4 behaviors of compassion that we also talk about. It's about stepping in and actually really doing something to support, to alleviate, and to bring to another state, not just a person, but maybe also an organization. One of our guests, Professor Michael West, he has said that if you, as a leader in a leadership position, if you support others, if you help others, helping others is associated with the reward centers in our brain. So helping others actually is also an act of self-help. And that sort of positive, collaborative empathy is contagious. And if you recruit enough people in an organization who think the same, that sort of positivity will ripple through the organization. And that's how you can hope to start to change certain old-fashioned structures. Yeah. Another thing I found interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine this morning about young people and their need to become possibly better leaders and more better leaders than we have put on this planet so far. And she said the youngsters are already thinking in terms of networks through social media, through everything that they now have at their disposal. Networks and networking are already more part of their normal life, and they are anti-hierarchy much more than we maybe were led to believe when we grew up. So that could be a good first step, that they are already kind of aware of the power of divided networking and some equal footing. That there is not one guru at the top and the rest do what they say.
No, and then here I think that's fantastic. And then we also have to be aware that the equal and equity, because we are at this, whether we like it or not, at the base of it all we are equal, but we are not at the same level of development. So also when making decisions, it cannot always be a democracy, which it's usually a very challenging thing for people who think like we should all be equal. which is fantastic, but you do need to have a level of a decision making. And you do need to recognize that, of course, we are not all, at the end of the day, absolutely the same level of development. But I think, same as you, I think it's exciting. I hope that, our generation or older generation, even older than ours, will find a way to make bridges and will work together with young people, because I think that mix, or that, what is the word I'm looking for? That level of collaboration is fantastic. We all bring something to the table. And that is just so beautiful, I think. Yeah.
And what we should bring to the table is dialogue and compassion rather than weapons and anger.
Yeah. And even furthermore, what, on top of that is let's have some difficult conversations. What did bring violence on the table in the first place? Why do we have violence in the world? Let's ask tough questions. Why do we have poverty? Why do we have this or that other issue, racism, or whatever the issues we're facing? Why? To go back to my burning question at the moment, is leadership development for the privileged? If it is, why is it? Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. What do we not want to lose is another way of asking that question. Why are we hanging on to that?
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So that's what I love. I love when we get together and we ask some really tough questions. And these are not easy questions to ask, but I think they get us moving somewhere.
Yeah, they have to. And if not now, when is a better time? It's this is, we're all in this together. We should now really start thinking about those things.
Yeah.
Great. It's been wonderful to talk to you. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add, or just another one of your powerful questions that we don't have answers to right now, but they're absolutely crucial? We have to ask them.
No, I think we have covered most of it. I think generally where we started is just to wrap up, as you said. We are today facing lots of challenges in the world, whether we are young or whether we are old. In different parts of the world. But what we're noticing more and more, how much we are interconnected. And that a problem in Syria or problem in Africa affects all of us. And I hope we also. I think we are. I don't want to say I hope, but I'm also noticing that we are more in touch with each other, whether, as a result of social media or something else, but we have more compassion, we have more empathy for each other. And that is, for me, moving into a positive direction. And where the work needs to happen is one way of doing this is through really doing some deep inner work, individual and team and organizational and deep inner work, and asking some tough questions and saying, what kind of person do I want to become? What kind of team or organization do I want to become? What kind of future leaders are we supporting or breeding, or how do we want to do? So really being very specific and very conscious about the actions that we are doing. Mm-hmm. And in, as I said, in which chair are we sitting in? If we are privileged, what are we going to do with that privilege? It's not necessarily to say, oh, beat yourself up. Everyone is privileged according to, when we compare it to someone else. But what are we going to do with that? Is the question. So, yeah. I'm leaving you with a question.
No, that's good. Questions are great. I read a good sentence about that a couple of months ago. I think it was in the middle of the lockdown, where somebody said we have to be connected and work together, because a first-class cabin doesn't help you when you're on the Titanic.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to have to write this down.
Okay.
It's really good.
Well, it's been fabulous to talk to you today. Thank you so much for all your insights. And I'm really looking forward to another conversation with you, hopefully.
Thank you, Brit, and thank you so much for inviting me. As you can tell, I love talking about this, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to have a voice. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.